Welcome back, everyone, to the No BS Real Estate Podcast, your listen-in how-to guide to the Australian property and finance market. I'm your host, Joe, and today we have Lorna Wang with us from Investie. She's a buyer's advocate. She's been killing it in the market. She has an unbelievable background and story, which I can't wait to share with everyone on how she got into buyer's advocacy. So, Lorna, thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you so much, Joe.
It's so cool. I've been hanging out to do an episode with you because, like I said, I really loved your story. And the way I kind of like to do these episodes is I get straight into it. And, I won't rapid fire too much. But my first question to you is, how did you get into buyer's advocacy and what drives your passion for helping people find their right fit home or investment property?
No, thanks so much, Joe, for the compliments. But yeah, I guess in terms of getting into the advocacy space, honestly, it was just really going through the experience of working with one. And I feel like, when I just worked with that one, it was just such a great experience in terms of the first property that I purchased. It was completely on my own, and so it was just a really poor experience on that end. And yeah, I just found it, I just found that I didn't really get what I wanted from that investment as
Mm,
well. So yeah, the first property that I bought, yeah, backtracking a bit, yeah, it was an investment property when I was like 22. And that one actually didn't perform very well. And it wasn't until years later when, I look back and it was just like, such a disappointing experience and, feeling like I had, really taken a hit in terms
mm,
of, yeah, going through that. And so, yeah, after that experience, I heard about a buyer's agent and, obviously did a bit more research just to understand what it was. And then I took a chance in terms of like, working with one. And that really kind of propelled my own property portfolio to the next level in terms of scaling and getting the sort of growth that I was after. And yeah, and that's pretty much like the catalyst for me wanting to be a buyer's agent, particularly in the investing space, because yeah, I don't want to see anyone kind of go through the experience of, buying something that's a poor performer and, doesn't get, people don't get what they want out of it.
that's such a cool story. Like, what a way to get into the industry because you know when you experience something firsthand, like obviously whoever you used as an advocate must have been really inspiring for you to then say, this is what I want to do on the back of that. So I really love that story and your passion behind it. And I think, when I look at the service, a lot of Australians don't really know much about buyers advocacy. Yes, there's a big portion of the market that use buyers advocates, and there's some that don't. How does the typical service offering work with yourself? Like if someone was to come to you and, ask for some assistance, what's the typical steps that you follow when it comes to buyers advocacy and your process?
Yeah, so with what I do, it's really to get a really clear understanding of the client. What is their current situation in terms of, their earnings, their saving habits, their spending, that sort of thing. I really need to get a clear picture on who they are and also what are they trying to achieve and why are they trying to achieve it as well. So, really taking a step back before we go and actually search for the property, really just get to know them, what their comforts are and what their risk tolerance is. And yeah, taking them through that process and kind of creating that purchasing brief. So yeah, once we do create that purchase brief, then we then take them through, the next step of like looking for the right locations that fit that and then start sourcing for the actual property. So what we do is we take the whole process off the client's plate and we take it on. So, all the stress involved with buying property and, you know, getting it settled and everything, the negotiations. Yeah, we take all of that.
That's awesome. And I think that's the biggest thing at the moment. We are so time poor. As times progress, like whether you have kids or you're working in full-time jobs or you're a full-time, house person, there's so there's so little time to do things. So you guys, it sounds like you guys really take the brunt of, that time away from, the research and spending, hours scrolling online at night. You guys are doing that kind of part of the process and also helping them save money in negotiation.
Yeah, exactly. Like going back onto that time pause aspect of things, like, we pretty much all work full time, and if not more as well, depending on what you do. If you're a business owner, or, if you're working in a large corporate and you have like KPIs to meet, and then, you've got your evenings, and evenings obviously is your personal time, and, your weekends is your like social time. Like, just people just don't really have the time to do that research. But not only that, just like learn about property and the property buying process, because that in itself, like, most people will only ever buy, a couple of properties. So with the experience that they have, a lot of the time they don't
Mm,
quite understand what's actually involved. And the thing is, with Australia, the unfortunate thing is that every state is also different when it comes to the buying process. So yeah, that's kind of like where we are able to step in, and especially being, Australia-wide buying, that kind of really helps our clients, yeah, pretty much like give them the
options.
full scope, yeah, full scope of like what to expect and everything.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think that's really important, that Australia-wide factor as well. Like you said, every state is different, so having that expertise. Is there a place that you particularly love purchasing in generally that because I know this is a typical thing with buyers advocates, we all have a type of what we like. Do you have anything that you're seeing perform well at the moment or that you like purchasing?
I think like in terms of property, always freestanding houses. So,
Yeah.
those are the types of assets that I will buy for clients. That's what I always see perform well. But in terms of like location wise, that can change from time to
Hmm.
time. So, for example, right now, like, everyone's talking about Queensland, but 6 months ago, everyone was talking about Perth and WA, and the markets are always going to change. And it's also, everyone's a little bit different in terms of what's in their portfolio as well. So, diversity is really important when trying to build a portfolio too. So, but yeah, in terms of like probably the easiest places to buy is in terms of Queensland, kind of like the buyer sometimes does have like a bit of an upper hand when it comes to negotiations in terms of pest and building and all of that. But yeah, every state I've been buying in, pretty much across Australia.
Wow, no, that's really interesting. And I think you're definitely right with that Perth and Queensland conversation. It has switched everyone I've spoken to has been talking about those two hotspots in particular. So no, it's interesting. And I would love to know, do you have like a successful negotiation story, kind of like that, it's that person who needed to secure a deal, you've obviously represented them. It was a bit of a tough negotiation, but you ended up getting, some success. Can you share any tales of your journeys?
Mm. Um, I don't have like, I guess, a client that was like maybe desperately purchasing something, but I did have a client earlier this year who I helped purchase in Adelaide. And the
Mm.
story is actually a bit of a funny one. So, look, this property, it actually came onto the market. However, the property was just a little bit unique in the sense that I think the vendors probably could have changed a couple of things up. Look, the furniture was a bit gaudy, and I think there's probably like a bit of a spicy backstory behind it,
Oh
because
no.
yeah, there was like one bedroom that was like completely black,
Okay.
like walls, ceiling, mirrors.
Oh jeez.
And yeah, I think it put a lot of, people off from, putting in an offer. There were offers.
Yeah.
However, the thing that actually made it even worse was that the vendors needed a really long-term settlement as well. So,
Right.
coupled with, the strange property, and
Mhm.
also, the long-term settlement, a lot of home buyers couldn't actually buy it. And with myself, I'd put in an offer. It wasn't the highest offer, and we were actually able to secure it. So I
Oh
was,
wow.
yeah, I was so stoked about that purchase, because what we did is after it did settle, it took about a week to paint. So,
Yeah.
we removed the mirrors, just painted the property and everything. And yeah, it was like, I think the paint was only like 7 grand. And, in terms of like what my bottom of the range, yeah, we were able to get it much lower as well.
Wow, that's so funny. I can't get over. It's like a 50 Shades of Grey kind of dungeon house. Oh my
Yeah, it's
gosh.
definitely the most memorable like
Oh
property
yeah.
purchase to date.
Yeah, I think that'll stick with you for a while. So, but good on you for getting that lower price in. I think that's so key. Maybe you came in with the property opportunity, the way it was set up. A lot of people were like, maybe not. And you came in and said, no, there's an opportunity here. A bit of paint can fix this, a bit of touch-ups can fix that. And that actually leads me to like one interesting question, I guess, is often people get caught up on the look and feel of a property, things that are cosmetic that can be changed. How do you go about picking properties? Because obviously we're visual people. Like as humans, we like to see something that's aesthetically pleasing to us and we're more drawn to it. So we end up saying, that's the house I like. And it's very hard to overlook factors like, well, the walls are purple and the curtains are yellow and I'm not into it. And how do I get rid of it? But you have to see beyond that, because those are cosmetic changes. So what's your advice to people, I guess, who are going through these open for inspections and as an owner occupier, and they are seeing little things like that could be changed, but they can't get over it. They're like, oh, this is so crap. I'm not going to buy the property. But how do you kind of see past that when you're looking at properties yourself, even?
Mm. I guess like from an owner occupier perspective, if you're living in it, then yeah, it definitely can be a little bit more challenging because, there are preferences, that sort of thing. But there's certain things that you can and can't change when it comes to a property. So for example, if you're looking at, the aspect of a property, like something like that, you're definitely not going to be able to change, certain floor plans as well. So when it comes to those items, like you know, those things, you can't change them, and obviously you've got to just take it as is. But if there's other things like, carpets or like, purple walls, as you mentioned, or the kitchen's a little bit older, you've got to look at your budget as well. Does it work with the numbers? Like, are you able to actually make those changes? But then from like an investment perspective, particularly like I do find that a lot of the time with investors, they can just, you know, they can be like, oh, I want a 4 bed, 2 bath, 2 car garage.
Mm,
And, us as the buyer's agent, as the buyer's advocate, taking them through the process, I've got to really understand, what is the specific reason behind that. And look, if we can't push past that, then obviously, we do let them know there's certain reasons that it may take a lot longer to find something that is suitable as
mm.
well. So then you've got the opportunity cost of missing out on all these other properties that don't meet your criteria. So yeah, it can be a bit difficult, but then also, once you then, really understand the client, or when I speak with them, most of them do turn around and be like, no, that actually does make sense. And
Yeah.
it's all about like the numbers when it comes to investing anyway. So, they're not going to be living in it. It's unlikely that they will ever will. Most
Yeah.
of them won't even go and see the property either. So it's just got to work from like from a dollars perspective.
No, it's interesting. And I think you bring up an interesting point there when you say you're looking at the structure, like the things you can't control, like can't change and can't control. It's like, well, often they might be the things that are really attractive about the property, just because something's a different color or something's not really that good, aesthetically pleasing. It doesn't mean that we can't, like you said, factor it into a budget or factor it into your pricing to kind of
Yeah.
account for, okay, well, I really hate the walls, but I love the location. I love the structure of the property itself and the floor plan. How much do I have to offer to then factor in, painting this house in my budget or fixing the yard the way you want it or whatever it is? So I think that's a really interesting point that you bring up. Lorna, I've loved chatting to you this morning. I think, you've had some really solid bits of advice there for customers. And the way I like to end the episode is ask you for that last piece of advice for the listeners out there today who are, homeowners, or maybe they're first time investors and they're just starting their journey, whether they're about to buy or maybe they're halfway through their purchase, they've been on market for a while. What's your advice to them at the moment going through the home buying journey?
Hmm. I think like if I was to look back at my own journey, for me, it took me like 7 years to save for my first deposit. And, over those 7 years, I think what I could have really done was either gotten a mentor or, just really like educated myself about
Mm.
property before actually jumping in. Because yeah, most people are going to take a couple of years to save a deposit. And so you've got all this time, popping on a podcast, just watching some YouTube videos can just like really just spark that I guess motivation to also keep going and keep saving as well. And a lot of the time what you will find is that so many people will go through, property and a lot of them will have really good experiences, but then there's a lot that will have really crappy experiences as well. But then just like learning off how people have been able to do it themselves will just like really help you as a property buyer, whether it's you being an owner occupier or you being an investor. Like as an owner occupier, there's so many things that I think people don't really consider when buying their own home. Like they'll just look at the inside of the house, decide whether or not they like it, but
Mhm.
don't really consider the external factors. Like what about the neighborhood? Is it in like an area that they want to be buying in? Like
Yes.
what's the street like? Is it on a busy road? Those sorts of things. So yeah, there's so many factors that people will go, they'll go and take a look at an open home for what, like 10, 15 minutes and then make a decision as to whether or not they'll put in an offer. And that's really not enough time. Like there's so much more behind it. And especially if you're spending, hundreds of thousands, even like 1 million or plus just on a property, you've got to do the due diligence behind it. You've got to get yourself educated.
That's such solid advice. I love that. Get yourself educated is that keynote. It's the way you put it in the last part, especially with the timing of how much time we actually spend in opens before we make that decision. It's so true. So thank you. I love that. I'm going to leave that message to ring through true to everyone who's listening. Lorna, thank you again for coming on the show. So wonderful to have you. And thank you for sharing your amazing story about how you got into all of this. I think it's really interesting. So thank you once again.
No, thank you so much, Joe. It's really good chatting with you.
Thank you. And thanks all our listeners for tuning in today. You can catch up on the episode on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening in the Abodey app at the moment, have fun, enjoy, good luck on your home buying journey, and we'll talk to you next time.